In the dense forests of western Virginia, where the Appalachian Mountains hide stories as old as their rock formations, were the property of the Blackwood family, a place where time seemed frozen, away from civilization for miles of dirt roads and impenetrable forests. It was in the harsh winter of 1987 that local authorities received an anonymous complaint about disturbing practices occurring in that remote property. Sheriff Mark Thompson, a 48-year-old man with gray hair and eyes carrying the weight of 2 decades applying the law in that region, directed his car along the winding road, accompanied by social worker Christine Weber. The January gray sky made the day as dark as the mission ahead. "I've heard stories about the Blackwood for years," said Thompson as the vehicle shook on the irregular road. "But no one is ever able to prove anything." Christine, a 35-year-old woman with a determination recorded in her features, nodded silently. In his folder he carried fragmented reports about children who never attended schools, about a family that rejected any contact with the outside world, and a patriarch whose authority was absolute. When they finally arrived on the property, they were greeted by a 2-story, old but well-maintained wooden house with smoke coming out of the chimney. Around several warehouses and a high fence delimited the territory. The silence was disturbing. The man who opened the door was about 65, but his rigid body and upright posture suggested the strength of someone younger. His penetrating blue eyes examined visitors with suspicion. Ezekiel Blackwood introduced Thompson. "We received a complaint about possible irregularities involving minors in this property." Ezekiel's wrinkled face remained impassive. "My family has lived here for generations. We take care of ours. We don't need external interference," as they argued at the door. Christine noticed movements on the second-floor windows. Curious eyes they watched, faces that quickly hid. During the inspection aloud, which found even disturbed the experienced professionals, 6 children aged 4 and 17 years, all presenting disquietly similar physical characteristics. Same blue eyes, same facial features, same face shape. Even more disturbing were the physical signs that Christine, trained to identify developmental anomalies, immediately noticed: cast fingers, dental arch malformations, subtle facial disproportion, classic signs of prolonged consanguinity. "Who are the parents of these children?" Christine asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everyone is Blackwood," said Ezekiel with a disturbing calm. "We are all Blackwood here." That's when Margaret, a young woman of about 30, appeared in the room. His eyes avoided contact, his body trembled slightly. "He is my father," he whispered, looking at Ezekiel. "And my children's grandfather." The silence that followed was broken only by the wooden floor ranger, while the true nature of the Blackwood family was beginning to reveal itself. What Thompson and Christine would discover in the following hours would only be the tip of the iceberg of a history of control, isolation, and a distorted family tradition that crossed generations. Check it out if it is already subscribed to this channel. The story you are about to know reveals one of the most shocking cases of family abuse ever documented in the U.S., with details that will never be shown in the traditional media. Ezekiel Blackwood was not just the family patriarch, he was his creator, his legislator, and his god. Born in 1922, the son of settlers who were already in isolation in the mountains, Ezekiel grew up under the influence of an authoritarian father and a submissive mother who were, as the investigation would later discover, first cousins. The property of the Blackwood, acquired in the mid-19th century, stretched by almost 200 acres of mountainous land. Rich in natural resources but isolated from progress and social transformations that shaped the rest of America. There Ezekiel built a microcosm where his rules were absolute. After the initial arrest and the confiscation of children for medical examinations, the investigators began to dig up the property's past. With search warrants, police discovered diaries, family records, and photographs hidden in the attic of the main house. What they found drew a line of horror that stretched for 3 generations. "The purity of lineage is the only guarantee of family strength," read in one of Ezekiel's diaries. Blackwood blood should not be diluted by outsiders. Each generation should strengthen what came before. The records showed that Ezekiel had married his own sister, Mary, when she was only 16 and 195 too. From this marriage were born 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. When Mary died during the birth of the 6th son, who did not survive either. In 1965, Ezekiel began to implement his most disturbing plan. Margaret, her eldest daughter, has been prepared since her teens to assume the role of matriarch. At 15, in 1972, she gave birth to her first child, the result of her relationship with her own father. In the following years, 5 more children would be born of this forced relationship. "He taught us from an early age that the outside world was corrupt and dangerous," said James Blackwood. one of Ezekiel's sons who managed to escape the property at the age of 17 in 1975, and whose anonymous denunciation years later finally brought the authorities to the property. We were indoctrinated to believe that only marrying within the family could preserve what he called the Blackwood gift. This supposed gift was actually a distortion of the reality created by Ezekiel to justify absolute control over his offspring. He believed that his lineage had a special connection with the earth and higher skills that would be diluted if mixed with ordinary blood. The property economy was self-sufficient. They cultivated food, raised animals, and sold wood and honey to get the minimum necessary they could not produce. The rare interactions with the outside world were always intermediated by Ezekiel, who kept his family in complete informational isolation. The children did not attend school, receiving only distorted basic and religious education taught by Ezekiel himself. Using a modified version of the Bible with altered passages and its own insertions, it created a system of beliefs that justified its practices and guaranteed absolute obedience. The investigators discovered a secret basement under one of the warehouses where they found evidence of severe punishment applied to those who questioned the patriarchal authority. Marks on the walls indicated that people had been chained there for days in inhuman conditions. In the name of the purity of the blood, he murmured Detective Rachel Katz as he examined the place. He created a true field of family concentration. As more detail emerged, it was clear that Ezekiel Blackwood had devised a system that not only allowed but demanded consanguinity as a form of control. By forcing relationships between siblings and between father and daughter, he guaranteed that no family bond was stronger than the loyalty to him, the supreme creator of the Blackwood lineage. Medical examinations performed at the 6 rescued children of Blackwood property revealed the biological price of Ezekiel's generational experiment. Dr. Samuel Reed, a geneticist at the Western University of Virginia Medical Center, led the team responsible for medical evaluation. What we are seeing in these children is the result of multiple generations of consanguinity, explained Dr. Reed in his confidential report. The congenital problems observed are not only the result of the relationship between Ezekiel and Margaret, but of an accumulation of recessive characteristics that probably date back to 5 or 6 generations of marriages between close relatives. Jessica, the oldest of 17-year-olds, had a moderate cognitive deficit, polydactyly, extra fingers in her hands, and a rare heart condition that would require surgery. Michael, 15, had severe malformations in the spine and a delayed physical development for his age. The 10-year-old twins, 10, shared a rare genetic condition that affected the liver and immune system, making them extremely vulnerable to infections. Timothy, 7, had a more serious picture of cognitive impairment, as well as kidney problems that would require follow-up for the rest of his life. The youngest, Abigail, just 4 years old, born when Margaret was already 43 years old, surprisingly had fewer obvious physical problems. But doctors warned that some problems could later speak out in development. In addition to physical conditions, psychological assessment revealed deep trauma in each of the children. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, a psychologist specializing in children's trauma, spent weeks building confidence with young Blackwood. They were created in a completely distorted reality system, he said. For these children, what they experienced was the only normality they knew. Dissociation and the defense mechanisms they developed are some of the most complex I've ever witnessed in my career. Jessica, the oldest, began to open during the 5th session. Dad said we were special, that our family had real blood that could not be mixed. When I turned 13, he said it was time for me to start my own family with Samuel, my younger brother. He said it was God's will. If you are a C when this story here, leave in the comments. Families like this need to be exposed. To show your support to victims who survived this nightmare. Your comment helps this story to reach more people and raise awareness of these horrible cases. The children's reports revealed a thorough control system, where Ezekiel manipulated every aspect of their lives, including the creation of family rituals that normalized incestuous relationships. The union ceremonies, as they were called, occurred when children hit puberty, preparing them to fulfill their family duty. Margaret, who initially seemed complicit in the eyes of the investigators, proved to be a deeply traumatized victim. During her interrogation, conducted with extreme sensitivity by Dr. Mitchell and Detective Katz, she finally shared her own horror. When I was 9, my mother died. That night, my father came to my room and said I would be the new mother of the family. I didn't understand what it meant until a few years later. When I tried to resist, he showed me the basement, ... quotes. His voice failed, his shaking hands covering his face by decades of abuse. After your first child, you simply cease to exist as a person. You become just a container. An analysis of Ezekiel's fingerprints. crossed with national databases, revealed something that further intensified horror. His real name was not Ezekiel Blackwood. Born as Robert Peterson in 1922, he had assumed the Blackwood identity after deserting from the Army during World War II. The original Blackwood family had mysteriously disappeared, and Robert Ezekiel had taken possession of the property. This disturbing detail suggested that the experiment of blood purity could have been initiated with a fundamental lie, making the suffering of the following generations even more meaningless. As children received medical and psychological treatment, small signs of recovery began to emerge. Timothy, who initially did not speak, began to communicate through drawings. Jessica, while still deeply traumatized, began to show interest in books and formal learning. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, always together, slowly began to develop independent identities. For these children, the outside world was simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. Simple things like television, ice cream, or interactions with other children were completely new experiences that had to be carefully introduced. "The recovery process will be long and complex," said Dr. Mitchell. "These children not only have to overcome severe trauma, but also learn a new way of existing in the world, one in which they are not defined by the blood they carry or by the control of a single man." The roots of the Blackwood tragedy stretched far beyond Ezekiel. With the investigation deepening in historical records, birth certificates, and documents found on the property, a disturbing standard began to emerge, drawing a line of consanguinity that dated the period of the American Civil War. The real Blackwood, as the investigators discovered, settled in the western Virginia mountains around 1840, coming from Scotland. Isaac Blackwood, the founder of the American lineage, brought with him not only his wife, but also 2 sisters and a younger brother. Parish records of the time indicated that after the death of his wife in childbirth, Isaac married his own younger sister, Elizabeth. This first documented case of consanguinity in the family coincided with the progressive isolation of the Blackwood, who moved away from the local community during the tumultuous years of the Civil War. The isolated families in the mountains of the Appalachia occasionally practiced marriages between cousins during the 19th and early 20th century, mainly due to geographical isolation, explained Dr. Martha Jenkins, a historian specializing in American rural communities. But the Blackwood led this practice to unusual extremes even for the time. A diary found in the attic, dated 1897 and written by Jonathan Blackwood, grandson of Isaac, contained the first explicit mention of a philosophy of blood purity. "The blood of the Blackwood carries the strength of the ancients. Each outer union weakens us unique. We must preserve what has been given to us, even if the world does not understand." This philosophy, initially expressed as a vague reference to ancestral traditions, would later be distorted and amplified by Ezekiel Robert until it became a cruel dogma that justified abuse and control. The medical records found on the property, carefully kept by generations, revealed a disturbing awareness of the genetic problems resulting from consanguinity. Detailed notes on physical conditions, child mortality, and blood failures suggested that Blackwood patriarchs understood the biological consequences of their practices, but saw anomalies as necessary sacrifices to preserve supposedly superior characteristics. "What makes this case particularly disturbing is the level of premeditation," said Dr. Reed. "We are not talking about ignorance about genetics. Some of Ezekiel's notes show rudimentary but functional knowledge about heredity. He was calculated, accepting defective products as a price to pay for his distorted view of purity." The investigation found that James Blackwood, the fugitive son who eventually reported the family, had not been the only one trying to escape. Evidence found in the basement indicated that at least 3 other people had tried to flee over the years. Their destinations remained unknown, but the darkened spots on the concrete floor suggested violent purposes. In a stack of stored correspondence, investigators found letters never sent, written by different family members over decades, silent requests for help who have never reached their recipients. One of them, written by Mary before her death, addressed to her distant cousin in Richmond, revealed the desperation. "If you receive this letter, please come and see my children. What he is planning for them is worse than death." Margaret's autopsy, which committed suicide while awaiting trial as an accomplice despite the recommendations of psychologists that she was treated as a victim, revealed decades of physical abuse beyond sexual abuse. His body told the story of broken bones that were never treated properly, burns, scars, and other trauma. Even more disturbing was the discovery that she had been through at least 8 pregnancies, not just the 6 known. The fate of the other 2 children remained a mystery that Ezekiel refused to clarify. DNA tests confirmed what the investigators already suspected. The 6 rescued children were effectively children and grandchildren of Ezekiel, simultaneously with Margaret as mother and daughter of the patriarch. Even more alarming, the tests indicated that James and Jessica's relationship, Margaret's 2 eldest sons, had resulted in a pregnancy. The young woman had undergone rudimentary abortion weeks before police intervention, explaining her staff of severe anemia. "We are dealing with a level of moral and genetic degradation that goes beyond common understanding," said prosecutor William Hargrove, by presenting formal accusations against Ezekiel. This man not only abused his own children, but he devised a system to perpetuate this abuse through generations, while Ezekiel awaited trial, remaining impassive and refusing to cooperate. Efforts focused on the recovery of the victims and the search for other possible family members. The Blackwood property, now surrounded by police ribbons, kept secrets that continued to be unearthed, literally in some cases, when excavations revealed small skeletons buried near the boundaries of the forest. The damn Blackwood lineage, fueled by isolation, control, and a distorted philosophy of purity, had finally been exposed. But for surviving victims, genetic shadow would continue to follow them for generations. 5 years after the discovery of the Blackwood property, the lives of the rescued children had taken dramatically different directions. The childhood protection system had done its best to keep them together, recognizing that despite the horrible circumstances, the ties between siblings represented the only form of continuity in their devastated lives. Jessica, now 22, had surpassed part of her cognitive limitations thanks to years of specialized education. With the support of a dedicated adoptive family, she attended a community college studying art therapy, a choice inspired by her own healing journey through artistic expression. "Art allowed me to speak when words could not," Jessica explained in a rare interview for an educational documentary about abuse survivors. His face, still marked by the distinctive features of consanguinity, now carried a serene determination. "Each painting is a part of the story I need to tell, not just for myself, but for my brothers who are still fighting." Michael, at the age of 20, faced more severe challenges. After multiple surgeries to correct his spinal deformity, he still suffered from chronic pain and limited mobility. His difficulties in social adaptation led him to periods of deep depression and 2 suicide attempts. Currently living in a therapeutic community, he found some comfort in use, demonstrating a natural talent for piano. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, at the age of 15, remained together in a foster home that specializes in children with complex medical needs. Their liver conditions had stabilized with proper treatment, but both needed continuous medication and regular monitoring. Academically, Sarah surprised her caregivers by showing exceptional aptitude for mathematics, while Samuel encountered more significant learning difficulties. Timothy, now 12, had made remarkable progress considering his initial diagnosis. After successful kidney transplantation, his physical health will improve considerably. Although he still had cognitive delays, he had developed functional communication skills and an extraordinary animal bond. His horsepower therapy had become a crucial component in his recovery. Little Abigail, 9 years old, demonstrated the impressive resilience that's sometimes observed in younger survivors of trauma. Adopted at age 5 by a family with experience in traumatized children, she had developed a relatively normal social behavior for her age. Although episodes of severe anxiety and recurring nightmares reveal underlying psychological scars, Dr. Reed continued to follow the genetic aspects of the case, publishing with protected identities studies on the effects of multi-generational consanguinity observed in Blackwood. "What we have learned from this tragic case has important implications for our understanding of human genetics," he explained. "Some of the observed conditions are so rare that we are essentially documenting manifestations never before studied of recessive genes. The genetic legacy of the Blackwood would continue for generations." Jessica, in deciding never to have biological children, expressed the weight of this inheritance. "I carry in every cell of my body the result of terrible decisions that were never mine. Closing this lineage is my choice, the first, truly mine." Ezekiel Blackwood, sentenced to multiple perpetual imprisonment, remained irreducible until the end, refusing to show remorse or providing information about other possible crimes. In 1995, he was found dead in his sullen apparent suicide that some interpreted as his last refusal to submit to external authority. Blackwood property, after years of legal disputes, was eventually demolished. At the site, at the initiative of survivors of abuse in conjunction with children's rights organizations, a small memorial and educational center was established, dedicated to preventing children's abuse and survivors' support. James Blackwood, the son who escaped and eventually denounced the horrors, emerged from the protection of witnesses after the trial. Married and adopted father of 2 children rescued from abusive situations, he dedicated his life to working with traumatized young people. Breaking the cycle does not only mean escaping physically, he reflected during a conference on family trauma. It's a daily job of unlearning what you were scheduled to believe about yourself, family, and love. The Blackwood case has led to significant changes in child protection protocols in isolated communities. With greater attention to families deliberately avoid contact with social and educational services. He also stressed the importance of specialized training for professionals working with survivors of ritual and systematic abuse. For the survivors, each anniversary of police intervention, which they simply called Freedom Day, it was an occasion to gather, sharing not only pain but also celebrating small wins, a diploma obtained, a week without nightmares, the ability to trust someone again. "We are not just a horror story to be told," Jessica said in her speech during the inauguration of the memorial. "We are real people rebuilding real lives. The blood that runs in our veins does not determine who we are or who we can become. While the biological effects of consanguinity would continue to manifest in their bodies, young Blackwood demonstrated that psychological currents, however heavy they were, could be broken. In their individual healing journeys, they offered a glimpse of hope to other survivors of systematic family abuse. If you watched so far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying "I watched here," so I can meet you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to follow more real cases like this. Leave your like in this video and share with people who know the truth behind the most shocking cases in American history. Your participation is fundamental to that we can continue to bring content that reveals realities that many prefer to ignore.